From international expulsion to becoming the first African nation to host the FIFA World Cup, South African football has come a long way. The Premier Soccer League is one of the top 15 ranked leagues in the world in terms of broadcasting rights, having signed a 1.6 billion rand deal with SuperSport, which is an African sports channel owned by multinational internet and media group Naspers, and according to the CAF 5-year rankings, is rated as the 5th best league in Africa. It is viewed across Africa by millions and is known for attracting the best undiscovered talent that Africa has to offer, with many players going on to bigger stages in club football. Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates, and Mamelodi Sundowns are some of the most recognizable names in African football, and the national team Bafana Bafana has seen the highest of highs, winning the 1996 African Cup of Nations, to the lowest of lows, the whole of 2006, and the 2012 Dance of Shame. But throughout it all, remains the most supported national team in the country. But to get to its current form was a long and strenuous journey filled with blood, tears, and strife. To understand how football in South Africa got to this point, we have to go all the way back to the 18th century, when the game's official structures mirrored the inequality in South African society. Throughout pre-colonial Africa, ritualistic dances and games were performed with a seriousness similar to the one taken in professional sports, and for purposes not altogether different, such as the striving of status, the assertion of identity, and the maintenance of power in one form or another. These core principles of past societies have endured and carried over into modern sports, forming the basis of competition. As it was a different time with different beliefs, pre-colonial societies in South Africa emphasized the importance of physical strength, fluidity in motion, and facilitated competition and creativity as traits important to the development of a strong, dominant society. This, in turn, encouraged the development of an overly competitive male athletic culture. For male Africans, activities such as stick fighting, cattle raiding, racing, and hunting was all sport. All were public spectacles which gave the youth, the young men specifically, the opportunity to demonstrate strength, forge and assert their identities, and in turn enhance their reputations amongst their communities. Just like football in modern times, a festive atmosphere enveloped the spectacle with an anticipation building towards the main event. Origins of football in Africa. Although what we now know as football is different to the rules the game abided by in the colonial period, according to all available references, soldiers, sailors, traders, and missionaries brought football to South Africa during Great Britain's imperial expansion in the second half of the 19th century, with what is believed to be the earliest documented match being played on August the 23rd, 1862. The earliest forms of the game in South Africa initially resembled the chaotic, rowdy elements of rugby, but over time became more organized when the laws of the game were established on October the 26th, 1863. After the codification of rugby union rules in 1871, the practitioners of association football became known as soccers, basically an abbreviation of association, while practitioners of rugby called themselves ruggers. The Anglo-Zulu War of 1879 and the subsequent war with the Afrikaner-led South African Republic, back then known as the Transvaal, in 1880 and 1881, brought a large influx of British soldiers who popularized the game further. However, while the sport rose in popularity, amongst white people, the ready and wholesome acceptance of British football amongst the slaves and basically African communities of that time fostered a perception of football being lower level and lower class, while rugby lent itself more readily to the construction of exclusionary social boundaries based on race, class, culture, and gender that we still see to this day. As Robert Morrill noted in his book, Making Men, Rugby and Masculine Identity, for a gentry attempting to seal itself off from blacks, soccer became emblematic of threatening socially integrative forces within society. As it forged its class identity, so it took to itself the rugby code as an additional racially exclusive identifying feature. The wins of Paul Roos's touring Springboks over England in 1906 and 1907 and 1912 further escalated the levels of rugby's popularity amongst white people. According to Albert Grindlin, Andre Odendaal and Bertrand Spies's theory, rugby's popularity within white and specifically Afrikaner culture was in line with the Afrikaners' quest for independence from the British, and the game came to be an integral part of Afrikaner identity. By the time Afrikaner students formed the Stellenbosch University Rugby Club in 1919, the sport was seen as the domain of white people, who, in the words of the revered J.E.C. Weldon, the pluck, the perseverance, the good temper, the self-control, the discipline, the cooperation, the esprit de corps, which merit success in cricket or football, are the very qualities which win the day in peace or war. He goes on to further say that the taste for sport, for athletic sport and exercise, which distinguishes our race, has been one of the main factors in the success which has attended the exertions, whether in improvement at home or in colonization abroad of the Anglo-Saxon race. While, quote, soccer was stigmatized as the corrupt persuasion of the lower class and the blacks. The rise of soccer's popularity amongst black communities. On the other side of the coin, the competitive ethos and creative performances that characterized spectacular public displays of physical prowess resonated with the black communities and cultures who prided themselves on their strength and masculine identity. According to historians such as Andre Odendaal, black communities' enthusiastic adoption of cricket, rugby, and specifically football signified a determined willingness to absorb and integrate into British civilizations. Some historians, such as Colin de B. Webb and John Wright, went as far as to suggest that African sporting achievements seemed to project the idea of equality with white people, and that African participation in sport stemmed from, quote, a desire to emphasize their social advantages, class position, and consciousness, as for the joy of the game itself, unquote. Although material poverty and a lack of facilities meant that black communities struggled to find suitable playing areas, football grew in popularity, and with the onset of industrialization and the shadow of apartheid looming, minorities adopted British soccer to cope with the social upheavals that were taking place. Inexpensive and easy to play, soccer was transformed into a sphere of action where expressions of African modernity could be forged, tested, and negotiated.